welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 549, and today's date is December 23rd, 2014, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Central Bankers Push the Economic Recovery by Manipulating the Economy. Okay, let's get into the economic collapse news, and out in Greece, we understand that they're trying to have elections, and Goldman Sachs was out there warning us that if these elections don't go the way the bankers want, they could see bail-ins just like Cyprus. Well, the elections aren't going that well. It looks like they're going for a third and final voting round next week. This is going to be around December 29th that this occurs. And if this doesn't go well, we could see Greece get Cyprus type of bail-ins, and we're going to have to watch these elections very carefully, see what's going on there. And we have to remember, Greece, since the IMF, the EU stepped in, they have put them into a huge amount of debt. The people continually have anti-austerity protests. They're angry, they're pissed off. Even the Human Rights Organization was out there saying, listen, what the EU and the IMF has done is basically a war crime at this point, where they're imposing austerity on the people. And again, central bankers really don't care about the people. They care about themselves. They have no allegiance to any country whatsoever. As long as they make a profit and they're pushing their debt further and further out there to each country and pretty much stealing from these countries, they really don't care. And we can see this is exactly what's going on out in Greece. They've been stolen from. They've put huge amount of pressure on the people. Youth unemployment and regular unemployment both are skyrocketing. People do not have work, and the whole entire Euro crisis is completely falling apart. I mean, look at France, look at Spain, look at Cyprus, look at Germany, UK. Everything is starting to crumble apart, and it is spreading like a domino effect, where one domino goes down and it spreads across the Eurozone. And here are some triggers that we need to be looking at in 2015. Germany loses faith in the Euro project. Spanish uncertainty reaches breaking point. France calls it a day. Pain of Italian reforms drives country away. Greece turns to left-wing extremes. European Central Bank runs into the Berlin Wall. And we're going to have to watch all these different things as time goes on. Now, we understand economic news came out today. We see that Canada's GDP has gained in October. The Canadian economy showed surprising strength in October, growing by 0.3% after a 0.4% gain in September, due in part to an unexpected surge in manufacturing. Well, actually, from this report, GDP fell by 1%. But of course, as they report this, they make it look like things are doing much, much better. And actually, I don't even believe that all these numbers, these GDP numbers in all these different countries are even true. Because when we look at everything, we see that how is manufacturing doing well when retail stores are closing? They're trying to push the autos on subprime people. Housing is falling apart, and with housing, you have all the manufacturing of goods that go into housing. And we see right now that Eurozone is struggling, the United States is struggling, and we keep on getting better and better economic news from the government. Something doesn't make sense here. Even the human consumer confidence rose from November's missed expectations to the highest since January of 2007. Well, we know what happened in 2008. We had a recession and everything came crumbling apart. So I'm not really looking at the consumer confidence, because basically all the consumers around the country, around the world, can be convinced that the economies are doing much better than they really are. Just like we're seeing, I mean, these numbers, GDP, inflation, unemployment, they're all manipulated. All these numbers are manipulated. All we've been seeing is layoffs. People can't find work. Tent cities are popping up. Retail is closing. Layoffs are all over the place from these retail places. But of course, they're not counted because they have to meet a certain requirement. Each state is different, but on average, you have to work a certain number of hours and get paid a certain number of dollars. If you don't meet this requirement, you are not counted for looking for unemployment insurance. And we're seeing a lot of this because we know a lot of these people are part-time working in retail. Another good indicator is the movie industry. Ticket sales in North America will total roughly about $10.5 billion, according to the New York Times, the lowest since 2000. Regal Cinemas, AMX theaters have seen profits collapse, and Carmike Cinemas has plunged. Let's take a look at this. If we look at this situation a year ago, and this is when unemployment was higher. It's much, much lower now. So we were in the high sixes back in 2013. We are in the high fives in 2014. But let's look at the profits and try to understand why this is happening. In 2013 at Regal Cinemas, $133 million. 2014, $58 million. It's almost in half. AMC Theaters, 2013, $84 million they brought in. 2014, $34 million. Again, half. Carmike Cinemas, 2013, $1.9 million. 2014, negative $6.7. Cineplex, 2013, $63.4 million. 2014, $44.2 million. Something is wrong here. Now, either the real economic indicators of what's really going on here are lying to us, or the government manipulated numbers are lying to us. And I'm going to go with the real economic indicators of what's really going on in our economy. And we look at durable goods right now, against expectations, 3% surge in November. Durable goods orders slipped by 0.7%. This is the biggest miss since 2013. Now, of course, today, the government, the central bankers were out there, and they revised their numbers. They're famous for doing this. The third quarter GDP, the one for the quarter ended September 30th, was revised from 3.9%, which in turn was revised higher from 3.5% to a mind-blowing 5%. So they're letting us know that this is the highest print since the third quarter of 2003, when GDP rose by 6.9%. So they're trying to tell us that GDP in third quarter rose by 5%. Now, why did this happen? Well, in the first quarter, we know of 2014, it was a complete loss, and they included Obamacare in the first quarter GDP. Well, it was so bad in the first quarter, and of course they blame this on the winter and the bad weather. And of course, we know this didn't happen all around the country. It only happened in certain locations. They took Obamacare out. And what they did is they took those Obamacare numbers and they decided to maneuver them and push them into a different location. The second revision of the third quarter GDP numbers and its final print, personal consumption increased by 2.2% to 3.2%. And it ended up contributing to about 2.21% of the final 4.96% GDP amount, up from 1.51%. So what did Americans supposedly spend so much more on compared to the previous revision released 1 month ago? Was it cars? Was it furniture? Was it housing? Was it utilities? Was it recreational goods, RVs, or anything else? Nope. It was none of those things. And of course, today out of the corporate media, they're telling us that, yes, consumer spending is up. It's amazing. So basically what happened here? What made this third quarter GDP rise to 5%? Well, it was Obamacare. And if we take a closer look at this, what do we see? Well, basically what happened here, as premiums went up, people went into their savings to pay for Obamacare. Personal savings have now crashed from what was originally an unrevised 5.6% in September, subsequently revised to 5% in November and 4.5% currently, and all the way down to 4.4% in November. Incidentally, this is the lowest savings rate since 2013 and the lowest savings rate for the month of November since 2006, a whopping $140 billion in GDP. So in short, today the market is euphoric and hitting all-time highs because America's dug into their savings and spent billions on the Affordable Care Act. This is why the U.S. is growing when the rest of the world is mired in triple dip recession numbers. Basically, they're really in a depression. And we can see right now, when they talk about spending, they added Obamacare into this, and the numbers have gone up. People are spending more money. They had to dig into their savings to pay for all of this, and this is why GDP went up. And we really have to think about this. They're telling us, not just here in America, but in Canada, that GDP is increasing. Things are better. The companies are manufacturing. But what we're looking at is the Baltic Dry Index. This is raw material where speculators cannot manipulate. And this raw material is used for manufacturing. And today we just broke the 800-point barrier. The Baltic Dry Index fell to 794 points, down 9 points as of December 22nd. What does that tell us? Somebody is lying. Can GDP be this high with the Baltic Dry Index this low? I don't think so. I don't think this can happen, because if we look back in time, right after the recession hit in 2008, when the Baltic Dry Index was at 11,000 or so points, it dropped all throughout this time period to 2012 to 647, and then it was pumped back up by free money, channel stuffing lots, producing things people don't need, piling up inventories. But we see right now that it is all falling apart, and the Baltic Dry Index is falling every single week, and it is getting worse and worse as time goes on. When we look at the housing industry, that is even getting worse. 6 months in a row, home prices have been revised lower. Like I said, I've been looking around the country into different areas, the Northeast, the South, the West, the Midwest. I see prices falling. I see homes on the market for 90 to 120 days with no offers whatsoever. And you can do this yourself. Just go on to Zillow and take a look at different neighborhoods. You can see, if you scroll down on a lot of these homes, you will see that prices have been reduced, and you can see how long the house has been on the market. And we can see in a lot of the neighborhoods, this is happening right now. And home prices have definitely continually being revised lower because people are not buying. New home sales printed at 438,000, down from prior revised lower 445,000, and missing expectations of a surge to 460,000. So they were way off, missing 8 of the last 10 months. We see new homes, they are falling. Sales are falling. Existing homes, they are falling, declining. We see this whole thing starting to fall apart. And we knew this was coming a year ago. How did we know this? Well, during August of 2013, we realized that major banks, their mortgage departments, they were laying off people because they knew the American people weren't going to be taking out mortgages because they were tapped out. Most of the purchases were made with free money from the Fed. They purchased these houses in cash. Investment companies, hedge funds, and foreign investors. Banks were told, keep those houses off the market. Let's drive these prices up. And as time went on, more and more mortgage employees were laid off. And we see mortgage applications, refinance applications, since that time period, continually bombing, declining. They're not getting better. And we're heading into the end of this year, going into next year. And of course, the government is going to try something with Freddie and Fannie. They're going to put that new law into effect where people really don't have to put a down deposit, maybe 3%. Most likely builders will cover them for the rest. And we can see right now they're going to give these mortgages to with anyone that has a heartbeat. They don't care. They need to push the debt out further and further. They might even get the illegals involved in this, saying, listen, you can have a house, no money down. What, you just came into this country? No problem, here's a mortgage. And guess what's going to happen? Just like we saw in 2008, all of a sudden, people are just going to leave their houses because they have nothing invested in it. They didn't put any down deposit, and this whole thing is going to come crashing down. Now, there are reports out there that Obamacare has jumped by millions, and this is unbelievable. People are just signing up left and right, and everyone knows how I feel about Obamacare. If you don't know how I feel, just go back to my other reports, and you can hear me just go on and on about Obamacare. But what has been happening on Obamacare, they have something there that's called auto sign-ups. Basically, if you had a policy before, it will automatically sign you up. And what it's doing, though, it's signing up those people who really don't want it, and it's signing those people up to a cheaper policy with less benefits. So you might have chosen a policy when you first signed up. The auto sign-ups are choosing a policy that they feel best fits you. So if you're in the middle of some type of surgery or going for some treatment and your policy is covering it and you're coming up to that auto sign up, all of a sudden you might not be covered anymore. And they're saying, oh my God, look at all these people. They're signing up like crazy. Actually, it's very difficult to opt out of Obamacare, and people are having a very rough time. Those people who didn't want it and thought they didn't have to sign up or do anything and they would just be dropped, guess what? They're automatically being signed up once again. And we can see right now, this is continually going on and on. Actually, Representative Mark Meadows wrote at the Washington Times, they will do so without knowing if you are currently undergoing a treatment or working with a specific doctor. They will do so without knowing your financial status. Despite the fact that millions of people who are already enrolled chose the plan that they believe was best for them, this system will choose a cheaper, with less benefits for you. They don't care. And we can see this is exactly what is going on. And people are very confused with this. They don't know what's going on. And it is a complete disaster. And Obamacare, again, should be completely wiped out of this, because this is not benefiting the American people. It's benefiting the insurance companies. Basically, it's bringing millions and millions of dollars into them. There is no competition anymore, so they can set the prices. There are taxes intertwined in Obamacare, and this is feeding into the revenue of the government, and this is what it is for. And there are other things that go along with this. What is happening here, the federal government is using Medicare reimbursements to force doctors to ask about guns. They want the doctors to ask the questions, do you own a firearm? And if they don't get the answers for each one of their patients, they're withholding the Medicare reimbursements. And again, this is completely unconstitutional. You do not have to answer this question whatsoever. And again, they want to know, because they're putting it in a database, and they want to know who owns a weapon, and this way they can correlate this into your social profile, and when the time is right, they can come after you. And of course, they're going to link this up to your medical records and see if you have any type of mental illness or anything, and they're going to try to remove the gun from you. New York has already started this. They've been doing this right now, and we can see right now a court is out there, and they have ruled that anyone with a psychiatric problem to possess a gun is allowed to have a weapon. A 3-judge panel has ruled that being hospitalized for a psychiatric problem is not a good reason to prevent someone from owning a gun. The federal ban on gun ownership for anyone judged to be a mental defective or committed to a mental institution violates his rights, according to the panel from the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals sitting in Cincinnati. The ruling was issued after Clifford Charles Tyler, a 73-year-old man in Michigan, lodged a lawsuit for not being able to buy a gun. Charles he requested to buy a gun and was rejected in 2011 over his stay in a mental institution in 1986. So again, the rights of the people cannot be infringed upon or limited, which means basically the same thing, but they cannot do anything, and this is why they continually write laws to limit your rights, because they know there's no such law that can override your rights. And this is why the founding fathers put this in place, and all these laws are absolutely meaningless because they infringe upon every single right. Your freedom of speech, search and seizure, which is Fourth Amendment, your Second Amendment, your right to own a weapon. And we can see right now they're doing everything they possibly can to try to take the weapons and the rights away from the people. Now, as we can see, the police have definitely gotten militarized, and we see the government is out there trying to pit the people against the police and the police against the people, and this is all in preparation for the economic collapse, because they understand there's going to be rioting, there's going to be people that are upset with the government, and we can see they're just trying to get everything in place for this, and they need the police and the people to be against each other. This will make it easier for the police to control the riots and control the protests and control what is going on, and this is why we see this. But if we look back in time, back to 1967, there was a poll done, a Gallup poll, that surveyed about 1,600 adults in 317 areas across America and found that a mere 6% thought police brutality even existed where they lived. The Gallup poll was repeated in 1991. This was before Rodney King in Los Angeles and the riots. And during that time, they found that 35% of Americans felt police brutality occurred in their area. So we see the percentage going up. In 1999, the figure went from 35% to 38%. And today, that figure is around 74% because of what has been going on. And we can see right now, the police and the people, they are taking two separate ends of a room right now, and this is actually what the federal government wants. They want this to happen. They want people to take sides. This is how they do pretty much everything. They love when they have the people take different sides. It distracts them from the real issues, and the real issue is the government officials. The real issue is the central bank that is pretty much controlling everything that's going on right now. Now, of course, as we know, Obama was out there saying, we're going to crack down on the police. We're going to give them body cameras. We're going to give them funding. We're going to nationalize them. We're going to make them report to the federal government. There will be no more local law enforcement. Everyone will be a federal police officer. And you can see this is where it is headed. Now, in Los Angeles, the police department is preparing to outfit its force with a body camera during interactions with the public. Civil rights groups are concerned over the idea that the footage now will not be made public to anyone except for the police and court proceedings. Body cameras are being touted as one way to increase accountability by recording police interaction with residents, but questions are looming about what happens to the recorded footage and who controls the material. And of course, as we know, the recordings can be manipulated, they can be edited, and if it's not being released to the people of what has been going on, there are going to be problems. And of course, this is for the federal police officers that are all going to be nationalized so they can keep recordings and edit the tapes, show everyone that, hey, listen, nothing went on here. It was the people's fault, not the police. And we can see where this is headed at this point in time. Now, out in New York, we understand those two police officers were shot and killed in the car. And right now, the mayor, Bill de Blasio, on Monday, he tried to reduce tensions with police force and called for a halt of the protesters for like a week or so, but the protesters have rejected the mayor's call for a temporary halt on the protest. Remember, Giuliani was out there. He was saying these protests are peaceful, but it looks like there are outside influences on these protests, making them go very, very violent. And we've seen the agent provocateurs getting into these protests because what the federal government wants is they want some type of race riot. And this has nothing to do about race whatsoever. This is about outside forces trying to push people into doing things they normally wouldn't do and trying to convince them of something that is happening. And we all have to be aware of what's going on here, and we all need to calm down and come together. We have to remember, these police in our local communities, I live in a local community, and I know many of them, they are here to serve, protect. They live in the community, and this is the way it was designed and set up. This is why we don't have federal police in each one of the towns and cities. This is why it was supposed to be local, but the government doesn't want it this way. They're trying to give them machine guns. They're trying to give them fatigues, Kevlar vests, tanks, because they're trying to bring them into a nationalized police force where they're no longer local. And when everything starts to fall apart, the police will be separate and apart from their community, and we can see they're trying to push this as hard as they possibly can. Now, late Friday, a federal judge dismissed a civil claim filed against George Bush and others like Richard Cheney, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, and Donald Rumsfeld, and others. Basically, they will not be held accountable for waging war in Iraq. They have immunity from further proceedings. And we knew that none of these people were going to be brought up on charges. They were being brought up on charges, and the lawsuit claimed that the high-ranking Bush officials used the fear of 9/11 to mislead the American public into supporting a war against Iraq, and that they issued knowingly false statements that Iraq was in league with Al-Qaeda and had weapons of mass destruction. when none of those things were true. And we know they weren't true. And again, same thing with the CIA torture report. No government official is going to be prosecuted. No one's going to go to jail. They're all in it together. They know exactly what's going on. They knew exactly what they were doing, but no one's going to press charges. And we have to remember, NSA is spying on everyone. Government officials, judges, you name it, they have something on someone. They'll make them do something they normally wouldn't do. And we've seen this over and over again. Now, as we know, the FBI is always in those areas, along with FEMA, with DHS, always in these areas when there's a false flag event. I mean, the FBI flew into Ukraine to help them there, and what did we see? We saw a false flag event. The FBI was in the location of the Boston bombing. We saw a false flag event. And we see wherever the FBI goes, that's where events seem to happen. And what's very interesting, there's a report out that the FBI is going to train about 30,000 officers for active shooter situations at stadiums. Now, as we know, when you go into a stadium or any type of sporting event or anything like this, you go through metal detectors, they search your bags. But the FBI will hold active shooter training drills at sports stadiums. 30,000 agents will take part in the training sessions, which will also help prepare officers for active shooter situations at businesses, schools, and public places. And what this tells me is they're getting ready for something to go live next year. They're training, they're practicing for something very, very big. And we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully. I'm going to put this on the sidebar on the X22Report.com site to let us know that FBI was training for something like this. Now, there is a report out there, and this is a Secret Service report about the White House. Remember when that man jumped over the fence and he made it all the way up to the front door, and another one did it, and no one was around there? And as we know, there's cameras, sensors on the ground, and Secret Service all over the place, and nobody spotted this person. So it really doesn't make sense. It seems like it was a setup. And we know it was a setup because right after that, they put a buffer zone between the fence and the outside, and they made it another like 5 feet or so where people couldn't be on top of that fence. And then all of a sudden, other government buildings were being reinforced with guards in front and putting up barriers. And now there's a new report out there. And the reason why they're doing all this is because they are getting ready for this collapse where people are going to riot, there's going to be civil unrest, and they realize it. Well, this report is saying that there are too few agents with little training assigned to patrolling the White House fence that needs to be at least 4 to 5 feet taller. This will help keep out intruders. And also, they would like to put a buffer zone in front of the White House that's a lot further than it is, and a smaller fence there to block anything else. So what is going on here? Basically, the 7.5-foot fence in front of the White House is not tall enough to stop the people trying to get into the White House. And we're going to see this happen to all the government buildings. And we see they're pushing this right now, and they want to make this fence at least 15 feet tall. They might as well dig a moat around it, and I think one congressman did mention this, and they might as well put electrified fences up and turrets with guards on top to guard the castle. I mean, where are we going with this? And we can see they are definitely getting ready for something big to happen, and we're going to have to watch to see if they actually go ahead and put this in, because if they do, this is a sure sign that they are getting prepared, and the report is already saying that they're going to do this, so we're going to have to watch that very carefully. Now, out in Afghanistan, we understand that the United States, NATO, they're never leaving this area, and it seems that China is maneuvering and bringing in more of their people into Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is meeting with China and Russia. They are trying to integrate Russia and Central Asia in the process of benefiting the Afghanistan economy with security and stability. China has 3 strategic goals in Afghanistan. First, to utilize raw materials and resources. Second, to promote joint business opportunities, including infrastructure projects such as railways, roads, and telecoms. And third, to prevent Afghanistan from becoming a base for separatists. And what is the United States and NATO doing in there? That's right, they're growing poppies, and they're fighting, and they're continuing with the war. and China and Russia are coming in there making deals for economic growth. There's a very big difference here in Afghanistan, and we see why the Afghan people are turning toward China and Russia and not the United States. Now out in Nicaragua, we can see that China has the go-ahead to create their canal, which is going to rival Panama. On Monday, it was announced that the start of work on a $50 billion shipping canal, an infrastructure project backed by China that aims to rival Panama's waterway and revitalize the economy of the second poorest country in the Americas. And they're saying that this is going to be a lot bigger than the Panama Canal, and bigger ships can pass through it. They're saying it should be operational by 2020. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand with MH17, this was a false flag event. Of course, they blamed it on Russia, which turned out to be false. They're still trying to blame it on the southeastern people, but it seems that there's more and more reports coming out, and it's all pointing towards Ukraine and the United States. Russian special services have evidence that the downing on the Malaysian Boeing over Ukraine's Donbass area in July might have happened as a result of an operation by Ukraine Secret Services. The source claims that, according to some evidence, the operation had been planned by the Ukrainian Security Service in cooperation with the National Security and Defense Council. The Ukrainian armed forces were ordered to act on the plan without really knowing its ultimate aims. And we already understand there was a Buk operators from Ukraine who were sitting on that. They were laughing when they said it was the southeastern people. And right now what we're seeing is a Ukrainian Air Force Su-25 combat jet took off from the airbase in Ukraine carrying air-to-air missiles, and it returned without them on the day that MH17 went down. So that is very interesting. The other things that are very interesting is that the autopsy report on the pilot of MH17 is confidential. The decisive evidence is the coroner's report on the corpse of the airliner's pilot. If the pilot was killed by bullets, then the standard explanation of the downing, that the plane was down by ground-fired missiles, isn't just false, it's an outright hoax. So where's the pilot's autopsy? The four nations doing the official investigation and report into the airliner downing are Ukraine, Australia, Belgium, and Netherlands. All four are U.S. allies, and one of them, Ukraine, is one of the two main suspects in the case. And how do you have this country investigating this? It makes no sense. And of course, they're not going to release the autopsy report. They made a pact that this certain type of information will stay confidential. If one country wants to let it out there, one of these countries just has to veto it, and it will not go public. Now, today, the Ukrainian parliament decided to give up the non-bloc status, and it looks like they're going to join NATO, and Russia ambassador to NATO is saying that this is going to lead to increasing the conflict potential in Europe, and I believe he's absolutely right, and this was definitely planned. They want this to happen, and we can see right now that Ukraine is having a very tough time. Their currency is falling. The Ukrainian economy is falling apart. They don't have enough coal to meet their needs to keep the electricity on, and we can see right now that Russia may turn off their gas once again. They paid part of their debt, and now the rest of it is due by the end of December. It's about $1.65 billion, and right now Ukraine has not paid for this, and it looks like they're heading down to a situation where the gas might be turned off once again. Now, Armenia seems like they are joining the Eurasian Economic Union. Putin has put his signature to a law that makes Armenia a full member of the Eurasian Economic Union, and this will come in effect in January of 2015. Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Armenia, they've all signed the treaty, and they're all part of the Eurasian Economic Union. Now, we understand yesterday someone, don't know who it is, and most likely it's the United States, they were cyber attacking North Korea and pretty much brought their entire network down. The U.S. has sanctioned its own cyber terror attack against North Korea, according to a credible source who contacted the anti-media. The damage the U.S. is hoping to do is not just intellectual, but is aimed at causing physical harm to the North Korean economy and, by default, its civilian population. But it doesn't stop there. According to other sources, the U.S. is also planning on launching more cyber attacks against North Korea banking system, which are planned to start tonight. There is also talk of covert military action against North Korea infrastructure, which includes hospitals, military bases, and nuclear facilities. And they're going all out on this, and they're provoking North Korea and trying to push this agenda as hard as they possibly can. Now, Obama is out there. He is trying to convince Congress to pass CISPA or CISPA. And you have to remember, he said he was going to veto these laws. Go back in time, look for the YouTube videos. You will see he was going to veto any type of cybersecurity bill like CISPA or CISA, which we knew was fake and phony at the time because he created the executive orders to support them. And now he is nudging Congress to revisit and pass these bills. Now, the French government is out there. They're trying to make a bigger deal about the recent attacks where they had these lone wolf people going around screaming at the top of their lungs, crashing into people, and they've decided to deploy about 300 extra soldiers since the recent attacks. So France is boosting security during the Christmas holiday, employing up to 300 soldiers across the country. Germany is on a terror alert right now. Germany is on its highest level of terror alert since the 1970s, say security authorities. It states that both lone perpetrators and self-sufficient small groups might be behind future attacks. We must assume that attacks of varying size and intensity are possible at any time in the Federal Republic of Germany. And this is coming from a confidential report. And like I said, we are going to see lone wolf attacks appear all over the place in Europe, in the United States, because they're going to have the big event occur very, very soon. Now, there's a very strange warning out there, and the FBI division of the U.S. city of Memphis warned on Monday that the Islamic State may explode the Memphis, Arkansas bridge in the United States through an active member of operating in Tennessee. So right now, they're pushing the propaganda that they're going to blow up a bridge. It's a very strange thing to blow up, but this is what they're going to try to do. Will this occur? We don't know. We see the propaganda and the false flags are flying wild right now because they know this economy is falling apart. It is completely crumbling. They realize eventually they're going to have an event to blame on another group and country to show they're the ones who brought the economy down. They're going to have to bring this event full steam ahead here to put boots on the ground in Iraq to get into Syria. Now, we understand that Sony decided not to put the interview into theaters, and now they reversed it. Now, Obama was out there saying, listen, don't be afraid. You should put the movie into the theaters. Don't let the terrorists win. And Sony Pictures has authorized the screening of the interview in select theaters. But we have to remember what occurred prior to this, where the Guardians of Peace were saying if this movie goes into the theaters, they will launch bombs in each one of these theaters and blow them up. And this seems like it's a complete setup for a false flag event. The government forced or nudged the movie company Sony to put the movie into the theaters to have the false flag event. And we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully. And we're going to have to see if this occurs. I'm going to put this on the sidebar of the X22Report.com in the potential false flag section. And if this does occur, we know this was a complete setup and they wanted this occur. And this would make it possible for them to put boots on the ground a lot more than they're doing now to really bring this war ahead, to really push the event, to really bring in the soldiers and eventually get into war with Russia, to get into war with North Korea, to get into war with Iran, and then eventually China. And what they can do with this is if they push this false flag forward, they can say, in retaliation, North Korea hit our financial markets. They brought it down, and we know this was going to be completely fake, phony, and false, and we know it's going to be from the inside that this occurred because they have everything in place to have this happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.